Welcome to Cybersecurity Engage. Ask Me Anything, Strategies for Cybersecurity Success. Next slide. Our Engage program is designed to grow, develop, and highlight careers, opportunities, and contributions of diverse talent within cybersecurity. Some of the topic areas covered are career development, career spotlight, transitions, leadership, and technology talks. The Engage program also entails diversity highlights. Here you see a few of the areas that we highlight in our Engage program. Our agenda today will start out with introductions of our guest speaker, followed by a Q&A session that will be moderated by Rick Hart, our Director of Career Placement. Following that session, we'll have information about Cyversity membership benefits, upcoming Engage webinars, and you can also communicate with us on the Atlanta Chapter Cyversity Slack channel or email the leadership team at atlanta@cyversity.org. Another item to let you know that this session is being recorded, and at the end of the session, you will be provided with a survey to provide us with feedback on today's discussion. Thank you. Ask Me Anything, Strategies for Cybersecurity Success. Our guest speaker is Keyaan Williams, board member, risk executive, cybersecurity strategist, executive coach, global consultant, and the funniest man in cybersecurity. Welcome, Keyaan.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. For those of you who don't know, I officially started doing stand-up comedy in 2022. I had a successful debut at the Punchline in Atlanta a couple of weeks ago. And the goal behind that was to advance my verbal communication. And so what I did for myself as part of the conversation that I'm providing to our participants today, the theme that we would apply to this, if we're talking about cybersecurity success, is that everybody in cybersecurity, regardless of your position or your title or your level in the organization, has to be intentional about continuing to advance your knowledge, your skills, and your abilities. And so I did it myself. I'm not asking anybody to do anything that I would not do. But in my career, I've been at this for about 25 years. Applying that model produces very good results and contributes to personal and professional success. For our conversation today, we'll cover 4 areas for my prepared remarks. I kind of memorized a speech to make sure that you guys receive good content and there's something interesting to listen to when you come back to the recording. And then the second half of the session will follow a program that I started this year called Ask Me Anything. The objective of Ask Me Anything is really my opportunity to contribute to the success of people who are going to be future cybersecurity leaders. And my goal is to answer any question that is ethical, legal, and moral. Ideally, we want to stick to cybersecurity because that's the mission of Cyversity, to increase diverse talent in the profession. But if you have other questions about other topics, if I can't answer it now, we can follow up and have a follow-on conversation about whatever your question is. For today's conversation, my prepared remarks are going to cover career advice, program management, reporting to the board, and communicating the value of security. The premise of this conversation is my belief that regardless of your title or your position in the organizational chart, everybody contributes value to the organization, and you don't have to be the CISO to produce good content that the board can act on, or you don't have to be the Chief Information Security Officer to contribute to the overall effectiveness of the cybersecurity program that protects the organization. When we talk about career advice, one of the questions that often comes up, and I received an email via our Ask Me Anything thread earlier this week, a gentleman in Africa, he was in Nigeria. So a gentleman in Nigeria just sent an email to the mailbox and said, hey, I just graduated with a degree in cybersecurity. How do I get started in reverse malware analysis and incident response? And I gave them a dedicated answer. I told them that there are a lot of professional associations, but you have to figure out where is the marketplace for the thing that you're interested in. Taking that email conversation and putting it in the context of career advice, one of the things that's very important is that people have to figure out what they really want to do. I think Hollywood does a bad job of representing what cybersecurity careers look like. So you observe, for example, that I do not have on a hoodie. I turned on the lights. I'm not in my mother's basement. And professionally, I don't do very much technical work. Most of what I do is strategy and leadership and governance. It doesn't require a hoodie or a basement to do either one of those. I'm often in a suit. I just dress down so that I can be comfortable. If you're at the beginning of your career, I think it's valuable to work in as many security areas as possible so that you figure out what it is that you like and what you don't like. For example, in the beginning of my career, I was a cable monkey. So I pulled thousands of miles of Ethernet cable through rafters and through buildings. And I decided that doing that was really not the best use of my time, even if I was super fit from crawling around pulling cables. Then I transitioned into a help desk. I worked as a system administrator for Windows in a large enterprise organization, but security was interesting to me because I had very little competition. There weren't a ton of security people back then. And it was also just a different kind of work, thinking about risk, positioning the organization for success, and responding to the threats that were in the marketplace in the early days of the internet. Now, if you don't have the opportunity to go back in time, which I haven't figured out yet, a lot of people have the option to accelerate the process of identifying what they want to do in cybersecurity by conducting a self-assessment using the NICE framework to identify what job roles align with your personal knowledge, skills, abilities, and interests. If I remember correctly, on the National Initiative for Cyber Careers and Education, and there's the S represents something, but as NICCS is the website. I'll post it in the chat during the Q&A, but they have 53 different job roles in cybersecurity that are organized into different categories. So some things are analytical, some things are more technical, some things are leadership and governance, but within every job role, they list knowledge, skills, abilities, and things that you should know and be able to do for the different work roles. When I do executive coaching, I often send the people that I'm coaching off on an adventure to actually say, is this knowledge, skill, ability for the full list of things required? Am I intermediate, beginner, or advanced? Usually the order is beginner, intermediate, or advanced, but it allows them to do a self-assessment without hiring somebody else or depending on somebody else to tell the individual what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses and what are you willing to work on to achieve the job that you're looking for. Beyond identifying what it is that you want to do, my other career advice relates to mastering adjacent knowledge areas and practices. When I used to be a line level manager, so it was middle management, not executive management, one of the most frustrating things with people who had certifications was that a certification represents a base of knowledge for a specific activity. And so I know people who have Microsoft certified system engineer. I know people who have Google Cloud certifications. They have an alphabet soup of certifications behind their name and did a very good job academically passing a collection of tests. But when you ask them to apply all of that academic knowledge in a practical sense, they tend to have struggles. And so understanding how things work in the real world and identifying other things that are related to security puts you in a position to talk to people who are not security people about what you're doing and why it matters and the value that it brings to the organization. If I use myself as an example, outside of my cybersecurity knowledge, I have a strong background in strategic planning and management accounting, which sound like they have nothing to do with cybersecurity until it's time for me to talk to boards of directors and business executives. Most board members are either CEOs or CFOs. And because I have a background in strategic planning, which resonates with the CEO people on a board, and because I have a background in management accounting, which resonates with the financial people on the board. Most of the people on a board of directors I can talk to about cybersecurity without ever saying the word cybersecurity. The challenge for the people listening to this webinar is to identify what are the relevant adjacent knowledge areas related to the business that you're working in or the industry that you support. For example, again, I worked at the Centers for Disease Control for 12 years. Had I stayed at the agency, I would have gotten a master's in public health so that nobody could argue with me about initiatives that I proposed to support what the CDC was doing, because I would have had a master's degree in the area that the business was focused on, and I still would have had the cybersecurity background that I already brought to the table. In summary, my first item was figure out what you want to do. My second item was master adjacent knowledges and practices. The third item that I think contributes significantly to career success is reading. I remember back in the 80s when I was younger, they said reading is fundamental, and they highlighted fun because they wanted people to enjoy the activity. As I have grown more gray and older in age, there is an adage that happens in business that says that leaders are readers. So if you have current insights about things that matter, most of that insight is going to come from industry publications, journals, books. Authoritative magazines are much better sources than TikTok or Twitter or any of the social media solutions that are out there. But the goal is to make sure that you can speak knowledgeably to non-technical business people about why the security that you're doing matters to the organization. Now, obviously, what matters is going to vary based on the industry that you're working in. If you work in oil and gas, for example, you should be very aware of industry trends. What is the impact of the pandemic on the production of petroleum or liquid natural gas or anything else? And then being able to discuss how do the things that you do with the security program contribute to success of the oil and gas industry or the financial services industry or manufacturing or anything else. Another interesting story that popped up that has been in the news over the last 2 weeks is that a specific protocol for industrial control systems has proven to be weaker than everybody thought it was, knowing in advance that MQTT was a weak protocol, because that language that's used to control industrial control systems was never designed for security, and there's not enough bandwidth on the circuits to encrypt the data and do what you would normally do in an information technology environment. And so now control systems engineers are scrambling to figure out how do you address the vulnerabilities, prevent compromise, and protect organizations. If it was not for reading, I would have no awareness of this, and then I would not be a good contributor to cybersecurity for industrial control systems type organizations. And so as you go forward, I highly encourage people who are going to stay in the cybersecurity career for a long time to regularly read industry news and journals and articles so that you know what's going on. As we transition from career advice to program management, there are really only two key objectives for program management. When I say program, I'm talking about the collection of all the projects and activities that contribute to the cybersecurity success of the organization. When you're dealing with program management, it's important to not only know your job, but also to be aware of how your job contributes to the broader success of the business. Ideally, everybody who works in security should know what the business does, how the business does it, how does the entire security program contribute to the big picture, and then how your individual work contributes to the contribution provided by security. When I was in business school, one of the things that we always used as an example was the widget. I don't know why it's widgets. Widgets are always driving the discussion, but if we use widgets in the context of my conversation about program management, what the business does is answered simply by the fact we produce widgets. The how the company does it becomes the exploration that everybody has to undertake. Are we mining ore, or are we buying the ore from a third-party provider, and now we have to deal with supply chains? Once we get the ore and we melt it down into some kind of format that allows us to stamp it out, put it on the assembly line, and run it through the manufacturing process, Now I have to deal with SCADA systems. I have to deal with automation. I have to deal with the factory. Where is the factory located? What regulatory requirements apply to the regional location in which we're operating, because it's going to affect HR and privacy and our staff and our employment. And as we start to dig deeper into my widget manufacturing organization, there become a lot of questions about how security contributes to the big picture. We have administrative controls that influence the HR policies and procedures of the organization. How are we protecting intellectual property? Because automation systems usually have schematics and designs that are unique to the organization that you really don't want to get out into the wild. And I specifically picked manufacturing because most people focus on financial services, and everybody can very easily think about, we don't want to lose money. Intellectual property requires a little more creativity and exploration about the risk that you're exposed to and how you're going to respond. And so even if I am an incident response engineer, the question that I'm answering is, how do I, as an engineer on the incident response team, contribute to the big picture for cybersecurity in an organization that's manufacturing widgets? Or if I do identity and access management, why does identity and access management matter for an organization that's producing widgets, that's primarily manufacturing, but still has information technology systems and operations technology systems and intellectual property to protect, and products and services that the organization cares about? The other thing related to program management, beyond thinking about your job and how it contributes to the broader success, is the way that the organization that you support organizes all of its security practices. My primary job is cybersecurity consulting. I don't do anything technical, but most of the work that my team and I do for customers is focused on building security programs and making sure those programs are aligned to the goals and the objectives of the organization that we're serving. In that context, what often comes up is arguments about the difference between different security program frameworks. Are we going to use ISO and build an information security management system? Are we going to use the critical security controls from the Center for Internet Security? Are we going to use NIST? And if we're using NIST, are we using the cybersecurity framework or the risk management framework? For the purpose of our conversation, I'll use NIST as the example because all of their content is free, and everything that the National Institute of Standards and Technology has to offer is readily available to the public by going to csrc.nist.gov. The idea with the cybersecurity framework versus the risk management framework is most people think about identify, detect, protect, respond, and recover inside that framework when people mention NIST, but that really is a collection of controls that equip an organization for cyber defense. It doesn't really address the rest of the security program when you get into risk management and governance and oversight and auditing and everything else that makes a security program work. And so understanding what the NIST cybersecurity framework does compared to the risk management framework, which produces a life cycle approach to identifying information and then identifying the systems that store and process and transmit that information, and then identifying system owners and the risk executive function that accepts responsibility and accountability for the operation of the system, and then goes into a much longer conversation worth of goals and initiatives outlined in a process of 6 steps that have an oversight function that's built into them. You can see from my descriptions that you have 2 very different approaches to building a security program. Now, often the development of that program is going to differ based on the size of the organization and the regulatory requirements. In some cases, you might use multiple frameworks because you're subject to multiple regulations. But regardless of your level as a security practitioner within the organization, it's important to understand, how does your individual work contribute to the program overall? And then how does that program contribute to the success of the organization? The other area that I think everybody should be familiar with is, how do you report to the board of directors? Now, I understand that the first thought that most people are probably having whether you're listening live or you come back and listen to this fabulous recording later, is that, hey, I don't report to the board, not my problem, I don't really care. I think that is a cliche that kind of comes along with the idea that people are only individually responsible for their job and nothing else. But in reality, every individual security person supports the entirety of the organization. One person not doing their job properly is going to create an exposure that the adversary can compromise, and then the whole organization goes down. So everybody needs to know what they're doing and why they're doing it, and producing good information that the organization can use. The reason that I focus on the board in this conversation is because of the responsibility that the board of directors has to provide oversight and governance for the organization. I think one of the things that Hollywood has done, similar to the board that they've done for cybersecurity, is that there's poor representation of what a board of directors actually does. You know, it's really not a bunch of fat cats that go to meetings and are wined and dined and live champagne wishes and caviar dreams. Board members are independent directors who have a fiduciary duty to act in a way that benefits the stakeholders of an organization. And you have board members that serve publicly traded companies, private companies, family-owned companies, and even nonprofit organizations. When you get past the hype and you think about what a board member actually does, there are really 10 things that they do. And understanding those 10 things then allows security people to start to frame the product of their work in a way that matters to board members, so that board members can use that information to make wise decisions. I'll run through the 10 things really quickly for context, and then we'll keep moving. But cybersecurity and the board really is more of a 40-hour course than it is a 4-minute conversation. But at a high level, the 10 things that a board does are: number one, establish the vision, mission, and purpose of an organization. Once that's done, they hire, monitor, and evaluate the chief executive. The board is responsible for financial oversight. The board ensures the organization has adequate resources, where resources are people, processes, and technology to achieve the mission of the organization. The board creates a strategic plan and ensures that it's followed. The board ensures legal compliance and ethical integrity. The board manages resources responsibly, recruits and orients new board members so that you have succession planning. The board enhances the organization's public standing. There's a lot of information that you may see in the marketplace now that talks about ESG, which is just environmentalism, sustainability, and governance. And there are a lot of areas that connect to that, but it's a board responsibility to take care of ESG. And then the final item is just strengthening the organization's programs and services. And so with that in mind, putting this in a security context, anything that security presents to the board should answer 2 important questions for board members who have those 10 responsibilities. Why do I care as a director who has a fiduciary responsibility to the organization? And how does the information that I'm provided relate to the duties and the oversight responsibility of the board? If you can't answer those questions, that information probably shouldn't go to the board, but everybody within the organization has the opportunity to help frame the conversation, identify the metrics and the measurements that are presented, and create it in such a way that as it moves up the chain from the bottom to the top of the organization, significant modifications aren't required. If I were king for a day and I was the CISO in a large organization and I had to report to the board, it would be very valuable for me, and I would consider those employees indispensable, where I had individual contributors who provided information that went into the board report, and I just reported what they told me. I didn't have to change it. I didn't have to analyze it. I didn't have to modify it. It allows my job to be easier. It allows everybody to contribute, and everybody is happy. Part of what we're reporting to the board allows security to demonstrate its value. And so I think it's stupid, given my financial background, to say that security is a cost center. It's only costing the organization money, and we just wipe our hands and go on about our business. In reality, there are multiple departments within an organization that have a cost associated with their operations, but that provide significant value to the success of the organization. You can say that security is a cost center but very few organizations are going to be able to operate without investing in a reasonable and appropriate security program. Where we get into the value conversation is the focus on our security metrics and our performance indicators that represent to non-technical business people the investments that we've made in the security program are worth it. My favorite resource for documenting the value of security is going to come from NIST Special Publication 800-55. That document is freely available on the Computer Security Resource Center at NIST. The benefit of the document is that it forces you to divide your security metrics into 3 specific measurement categories, where you have implementation measures, you have efficiency and effectiveness measures, and then you have impact measures. The implementation measures quantify the execution of a security policy, and these measures are produced from formal assessments and your risk register that represent your progress in implementing the security program, specific security control policies and procedures. Usually the implementation measures aren't presented to the board, but it would be something that you present to the CEO and senior executives within the organization. Effectiveness and efficiency measures help measure the results of security service delivery. At a high level, this is going to be all of your technical controls, and it allows you to monitor the performance at an organizational level and at a system level for the catalog of controls that you've put in place to verify that they're installed correctly, operating as intended, and meeting the desired outcome. This allows you at the CISO level, at the CIO level, at the operations level to identify what's doing what it's supposed to and what's not working as intended so that we can provide remediation or replace the control. The impact measures measure the quantity, or they quantify the business or the mission consequences of a security event. It's the impact measures that exist as the only thing that you really present to the board, but the board doesn't magically get impact measures. You've got to document, you've got to track, you've got to measure. What you're ultimately reporting is the impact of security on the business mission and the organization, and it allows you to combine all of the information from your implementation measurement and your efficiency and your effective measurement. Then if you do it properly, you could take something like 20% of our employees are not doing annual security awareness training, which is a requirement. The impact of them not doing security awareness training is that we have a high degree of user-generated incidents. Those user-generated incidents are impacting our revenue, our reputation, and our operational resilience because we have outages that were preventable because people aren't bothering to do training that we paid for. And so within that very brief conversation, the implementation part was the policy. The policy says all employees have to do security awareness training. Efficiency and effectiveness focuses on, we delivered everything using pick your favorite delivery solution for security awareness training. The impact is we continue to have preventable incidents, and those incidents have a financial cost. They're taking systems offline. They're consuming resources. That is the way that you would format the information to present it to the board, to present it to management, to present it to IT and security. But that type of information is the type of information that everybody in the organization should be able to contribute to, if not generate by themselves at their level for the department that they're working in. And so these are my keys to success. Again, as a recap, there were just 4 items that I wanted everybody to focus on before we opened it up for questions. Number 1, figure out what you really want to do and read and learn everything that you can about how your security career contributes to the success of the organization that you support. Once you figure out what you want to do, you should be able to plug your individual contributor activities into the management of the security program overall. Everybody should be able to produce metrics that you're going to report to the board and to other stakeholders. And then the way that you frame the metrics help communicate the value that security is providing within the organization. With that, I'll turn it back over to Rick to help facilitate the Q&A session, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has about what we covered in my delivery or anything else that happens to be on your mind.
Hey, Kia, thank you for that wealth of information you just shared with us. So, guys, if you don't mind, just drop your questions in the chat, and I will make sure we relay those over to Keyaan. So, Keyaan, the first question in the chat is I've heard several times myself is any guidance for entry-level cybersecurity jobs?
Well, entry level is interesting because organizations don't know how to hire people. If you go and look up, if you just do a Google search, entry level cybersecurity analyst, what they're going to be looking for is somebody who is new to the profession that has 50 years of experience in reverse malware analysis and a PhD. And so I would argue that a lot of the requirements are unreasonable or unattainable. What organizations are really doing is they're looking for cheap labor and they want to justify a lack of salary compared to the investment that they're making in somebody who does or does not have a certain amount of skill. When I hire myself, or within my company, when I'm hiring employees, one of the things that we focus on is what is the academic background, the individual's willingness to learn a new set of skills, and then are they willing to accept an entry-level salary that comes along with the opportunity to grow financially and professionally over time. Other employers that follow the same approach are going to be a better fit than some of those ridiculous job announcements that you see where they're asking for the world, but they're not really paying you anything for it.
Okay, well, thank you, Keyaan. The next question that's in the chat is a pretty personal question, but I'm going to go for it. So someone said that they've recently been awarded with a training in cybersecurity by Intuit. I have the choice to focus in application security or network security and cloud security. I'm having a hard time to choose. What is your take on that based on what the market is, where the market is heading?
I would not base my future on today's market. When I started in cybersecurity, all of the things that they did back then have changed drastically. What I think is going to be the most valuable for people who are at the beginning of their careers is to learn all of the fundamentals. How do you do threat modeling? How does incident response really work? How do you integrate security into vulnerability management and threat assessment and patch management? And then those fundamentals are going to carry you all the way to your retirement, because the only thing that really changes is the technology. Like in the beginning, I feel like I'm opening up the Bible, but in the beginning, I worked on mainframe systems, and then I went from mainframe to client server to hybrid, where you still have a data center, but you have things in the cloud. At some point in the future, a lot of things are going to be in the cloud, and then people are going to recognize that most of your cloud service providers can't run a security program, and then people are going to move stuff back to a data center. And so I think it would be a mistake to focus on a specific technology in the beginning. I think it would be much more valuable to understand how does security work independent of the vendor and independent of the technology, but what is the practice? Like there is a way to do threat modeling, whether you're using PASTA or Stride or any of the other approaches, that is still relevant independent of the information system or the environment that you're applying it to. There's a way to do identity and access management without having to use a specific vendor. You have to do identity proofing, you have to do credentialing, you have to do privilege access management. All of those fundamental things are practices that people can learn. And then you learn the technology that supports your ability to do that today. And if the technology changes, you still know how things work.
Great, thanks, Keyaan. Another question from Sonia Kim. What are some roles that she could focus on to become a BCISO in the next few years? This person has 20 years of healthcare experience and 5 years built a startup as well in the last 12 years. So what are some of the things that she could focus on to become a BCISO? I'm sorry, BISO, my apologies. You're on mute, Key.
The BISO, I think, is similar to the cloud in terms of marketing context. because I started out in telecommunications, back then the cloud was the network communications that existed outside of my boundary that I had no control over and had no idea how it worked on the inside. And so now everybody is saying that I'm moving stuff to the cloud without understanding the definition. I think the same thing is happening with the Business Information Security Officer. If you look at the NIST risk management framework, they have in special publication 800-39 a 3-tier organizational structure where tier 1 is the organization level that represents the board and senior management. Tier 2 is all of your business functions, IT, operations, finance, marketing. Each one of those business functions then provides oversight and governance for the technology and the data that is stored, processed, and transmitted to support the execution of the function. So if you think of marketing, a lot of marketing organizations are using Salesforce or HubSpot or something like that. The chief marketing officer would be the business executive who owns the IT and owns all of the information. The reason that I provide that background is that the business information security officer is the middle level manager that would work in partnership with the chief marketing officer to ensure the organization's strategy for cybersecurity is aligned, implemented, and executed successfully. And then the business information security officer is going to report all that information up to the CISO or the office of the CISO. But that term BISO is really just an embedded security manager dedicated to a department to make sure the department meets all the security requirements in the organization. And so it's pretty straightforward. Now the question becomes, if you want to be a business information security officer, have you mastered all of the practices related to a specific business unit and the technology that that business unit uses and the risk for the type of information that business department processes? Because the requirements for a BISO that supports human resources are going to be slightly different from a BISO that supports application development, or a BISO that supports marketing, or a BISO that supports OT and control system engineering. So now you have to specialize in a specific area of the business so that you can combine your security expertise with the business unit requirements within an organization. And it's basically what a CISO does. A CISO just knows all the business units. A business information security officer specializes in a specific business unit.
All right, thank you, Keyaan. One other question I have is, how would you advise someone on how to find a mentor in cybersecurity?
Sign up for Cyversity, because Cyversity has a mentoring program. So if you're not a member, you get the value of your investment immediately, just based on the services that are naturally offered to members. Outside of Cyversity, there are a lot of people who have gotten to a position in their careers where they have the time, the money, and the interest to donate what they have to help others kind of come along. Mentorship, I think, is an interesting concern, because there's a difference between a mentor and a coach. And so what it really comes down to is, what outcome are you trying to produce? I have a certification as an executive coach. From a certified coach's perspective, there is a difference between the outcome that's produced by a mentor and the outcome that's produced by a coach. If you take sports, since we just had the Super Bowl, a mentor is going to look at you and you say, "Hey, mentor, I want to be a football player." And they say, "Hey, based on the size of your ankles and your weight and your height, you should be an offensive lineman instead of a defensive lineman." Or, "You're pretty quick there, you should be a running back." The mentor is going to make suggestions to you based on what they think about you. A coach works from the opposite direction, where a coach is going to say to you, "Hey, you have said you want to be a football player. Tell me what kind of football player you want to be, and then I will help you maximize your success in the role that you have chosen." And so I caution people to make sure that they know the outcome that they want produced. If you want somebody to tell you what to do, a mentor is the right person, and they'll give you some generalized recommendations based on their experience. If you want somebody to help you maximize what you've already decided, coaching is the better choice, because a coach is going to help you be the best defensive back that you've decided to be. And then if we're being even more specific, maybe it's the best safety, because you don't want to just be a cornerback, but you want to be a strong safety. The more specifically you have identified what you want to do, the more likely it is that a coach is going to help you. If you have no idea, you're taking random suggestions from a mentor, and then you just want to make sure the mentor that you select has a broad range of experience and can point you in a reasonable and correct direction. Oh, Eric, you did what I did, so you're on mute.
There we go. Sorry about that. All right. So one last question, unless any more pops into the chat, is what were some of your biggest challenges, Keyaan, in starting a cybersecurity consulting firm?
So to answer the question, I have to put my ministry hat on. And so
Okay.
if you believe what I believe, cool. If you don't believe it, no harm, no foul. But I did not seek to be an entrepreneur. I found myself unexpectedly unemployed. And it was revealed to me through the process that God's plan for me was to run my own business. And through doing that, I have the option and the opportunity to be responsible for not only my family, but the family of all of my employees. And so running a business is not really the easiest thing I've ever done. It's probably the hardest thing that I've ever done because of all of the responsibilities that come along with it. With that said, some of the things that contributed to my success were, one, knowing exactly what I want to do. And so I don't do technical cybersecurity consulting. I only do strategy. I only do risk management. I only build security programs. So I'm hanging out in an area where I don't have a lot of competition, which allows the business to be profitable. If anybody's thinking about starting their own consulting firm, what I learned in business school is that the more specific and the more niche you are, the greater opportunity you have for success, because you're eliminating the number of people that you have to compete with, and you're increasing the likelihood of potential customers subscribing to the service that you offer. The other thing that has really contributed to my success is I have spent meaningful amounts of money on coaching from people who do what I don't do, so that I can learn from the best. So I'm not a marketing person. I spent a lot of money to be in a marketing mastermind. Now I probably have a PhD level of knowledge about marketing and positioning and other things. But some really smart people that I know, for those of you who want to be business owners, said that you have to invest 10 to 20% of your revenue in your continuing education if you're running a business. The other thing is, you can't run a business if you don't understand accounting. I was fortunate that my degree was going to be accounting before I changed it to information systems. So I learned how to do management accounting from an academic level. I thought I was going to be a CFO until I fell into this IT and cybersecurity thing. But those make a huge difference in success, because if you can't manage your own books and you don't hire a bookkeeper, you have no idea what's happening to your money. A young lady that I coach, we had an interesting conversation yesterday, in fact, where she said for the first couple of years of her business, she was running a nonprofit because what she charged for her services barely covered her overhead, and her profit margin was less than 1%. People do not go into business to break even. People go into business to generate a profit. And so if your salary is $85,000 per year, your business probably has to bring in at least $250,000 in revenue so that you can take home $85,000. Because I spend a lot of money on insurance for the business, for professional liability insurance. Because my company has a board of directors, I spend big money on D&O insurance for all my board members. My board members get fringe benefits and they get paid a share of the revenue on top of their salary. My operational IT costs for all of my cloud services, for my desktops and my computers, that stuff starts adding up. And so it sounds unreasonable that you would need to generate $250,000 in revenue to take $85,000 home. But if you're a solopreneur that needs to be the target within the first couple of years, otherwise you'd be better off just being a W-2 employee and making $100,000 per year and not worrying about the headache and the overhead.
Thank you. All right. We did have one question to pop up, and I think it's a great question. So I'm going to go ahead, if you don't mind, Keyaan, and this will be the last question. Also, guys, the chat is really going strong over here. There's a lot of information going back and forth in the chat, so please feel free to use that. And we also posted a link in there about future Cybersecurity events. So Keyaan, a last question. How did you go about learning to build and develop strategies?
There is a strategy association that's a national association that's floating around in Atlanta. And so I learned most of it academically because I have a master's in business administration. So strategy was part of my coursework for my master's degree. For people who do not want to spend $40,000 on an MBA, you can align yourself with the Strategy Association. I think their website is strategyassociation.org. They have a chapter in Atlanta. They have a entry level and a senior level certification. There's a lot of great content in there. I subscribe to Harvard Business Review. It's something that I started doing for my MBA program that I've continued to do. Harvard, MIT, a lot of those business schools have good publications where for maybe $100 a year, you can just read the magazine and just read all the strategy articles. That would be a good alternative to getting a certification. You know, talking about certifications, I worked in the certification industry. I basically wrote the Certified Chief Information Security Officer program for EC Council. And so I know how certifications work. And even being the author of a accredited certification, I would still say you really don't need a certification or a degree if you're willing to apply yourself to obtaining the knowledge. And there is a lot of knowledge out there that doesn't cost a lot of money. What does not exist in the marketplace is very many people who are cybersecurity professionals who understand traditional old school business strategic planning. You know, most security people are unfamiliar with the balanced scorecard. 80% of business executives who have a MBA or go to business school had to learn the balanced scorecard as part of their academic coursework. And that is how they measure the performance of the businesses if they're at the business unit level, or for the entire organization if they're at the executive level. So the more the individuals can learn about the tools and the techniques that business people are using and then communicate their security metrics, findings, and results in that language, the more you'll have the opportunity to practice strategic planning, strategic management, strategy execution, and all of the other things. If there are any executives here, my one shameless plug that is not complimentary, because I have plenty of complimentary resources. I do a conference in Atlanta at the Buckhead Club in July. The pricing for that for executives is reasonable. We talk about strategy all day for 2 days in a fancy pants location. For people that really want to go the extra mile, I'm doing an executive retreat at a super fancy pants place in Colorado, but that's really only for CISOs, business owners, board members. The reason that I mentioned both of those is that I'm constantly talking about these things. They're fresh on my mind, and I'm happy to answer any question that you have. In the chat, I posted a link for my complimentary gift. So I run this program called the Cyber Career Lab. In the Cyber Career Lab, if you go to the page, there is a button that pops up an email. The button says, ask me anything. If you can send any question to that email, my team and I will answer it, no strings attached, just to make sure that people have good information and they're not pointed in stupid directions.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to ask, how could they reach you or reach out to you after this session? But I see you got ahead of me, so really appreciate it. And so we're going to go ahead and just say thanks again to Keyaan for taking time out to speak with us today. Tons of information provided. So I'm sure you got something out of it. I know I did. So just this follow up, moving through, want to talk to you guys about the Cyversity membership benefits. It allows you to explore, assess, develop, and connect. So as you know now, we have our job boards and stuff like that online. And this will allow you to access those job boards. So please go out, look at it, and join us. Here's the membership cost. If you're a student, it's $20. A professional membership is $100 and is good for a year. This is actually if you scan this, it will give you more information about the Cyversity membership. Okay. A little bit more about, being a member and non-members. Even if you're a non-member, you still actually get some benefits from Cyversity, but when you're a member, you get a whole lot more. Especially the Slack community is a great tool. Okay. This is our mission statement. Our mission is to achieve the consistent representation of women and underrepresented minorities in this cybersecurity industry through programs designed to diversity, educate, and empower. Cyversity tackles the great cyber divide with scholarship opportunities, diverse workforce development, innovative outreach, and mentoring programs. Hence, that was a great question about mentoring the Keyaan. Okay. So these are some of the events that are up and coming. So please take notes of these, but if you're a member, you will also have access to the Cybersecurity calendar, the Atlanta chapter, that will show you these events as well. All right, and also this is being recorded, so you will have access to go back and look at these. All right, so just again want to say thank you to Keyaan, and thanks everyone for joining us today. I truly appreciate you guys taking your lunch hour to come to this event. So if nothing else, you guys have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you.